becoming a Christian isn't like changing from one team to another. When you change teams in a sport, your uniform changes, your teammates change, who you're opposed to changes, but the game and the way you play fundamentally stay the same. And far too many Christians seem to live as if they think the difference between following Jesus and not is primarily about who is on your team and who the opponent is, or surface level details like the equivalent of a uniform change. Becoming a Christian is less like changing teams and more like changing sports. First of all, let's dive a bit deeper into the analogy just for a moment. There are a lot of similarities between football and soccer. They're both sports, both have uniforms, they're played on rectangular fields of grass, each team has a side, you're trying to score points. There are a lot of similarities, but I'm sure that you can agree in soccer and football, the differences are pretty significant. If you switch from football to soccer, how the game works changes completely. Pretty much everything about the way you act changes, including how you go about trying to win. And that's the same degree of change that we should expect to see in a Christian life. There are similarities between the Christian and the non-Christian life. Both have jobs, have families, have hard days, eat, sleep, etc. But the way that a Christian should see the world is different at a really basic level. So let's talk about 3 basic teachings of Christianity that should logically have some pretty massive impacts on the way we live our lives. First, you believe that the way to live a full life is to lay down your life. You've said, my life is not my own. It belongs to God, and I'm more concerned with what He wants for my life than what I want for my life. It's better to serve than to be served, following in the steps of Jesus. So logically, you're not going to be concerned with power struggles, and if you happen to have power, you'll use it to serve others. Along similar lines, your God and King loves His enemies and your enemies, and that's what Jesus both models for us and commands us to do. Not only that, this isn't a surface level thing. Love is literally the basic reality of the universe because God created it that way. To hate an enemy would be to reject Jesus' example, to ignore that God loved us when we were His enemies, to ignore a direct commandment from God, and to live a life disconnected from what we know to be reality. So to hate an enemy, that would just be ridiculous. Third, you know the way the story ends. Your eternal destiny is secure. Not only that, God is in control of the here and now. We have nothing to fear from the stock market, elections, or even sickness and death. We can hold things loosely. We don't need to live lives of anxiety. Certainly, there will be sadness at the brokenness of the world, but our hope is untouchable. Even if we live lives of wall-to-wall suffering, this life will be like the blink of an eye once God welcomes us home. Those are completely uncontroversial beliefs of followers of Jesus for the past 2,000 years. And I don't think I need to go into detail articulating how that is a very different understanding of reality than the view that the rest of the world holds. I wasn't actually originally planning to do this, but I feel like I just need to pause and say, isn't that a beautiful picture of life? Like a life where you don't have to be consumed with power dynamics and a rat race to get to the top. A life where you don't have to constantly be trying to get yours. You don't have to be enslaved to the hatred of your enemies, where you have nothing to fear from the economy or politics or sickness or tragedy because you know the way the story ends. The fact that that kind of life is available is such good news. Okay, let's talk about a couple different implications of this. Changing from football to soccer isn't just a matter of swapping out a few rules. You can't just add on a bit of soccer here and there and say you're playing soccer now. If you've been playing football and just start kicking the ball more often, but still play with first downs, no one would say, oh, yep, that is soccer. It's not just changing appearances. There's a whole new vision, a whole new structure, a whole new understanding of life that you've been invited into. It's being reborn. Through the Bible, we see this described as a new life, as being foreigners in the world, strangers or exiles. We are foreigners not because we're the away team, but because everyone else is playing a different game completely. And that's uncomfortable. Maybe when I was describing the Christian life just a moment ago, you thought people would think you were an idiot if you lived that way. 100%. If you are wrong about these things, about Jesus, about love, about service, about enemies, this would be an incredibly foolish way to live. But if you are right, living any other way would be madness. But yeah, there is a huge amount of pressure to not live your life in these ways. Almost everyone else is still lining up for downs. And unfortunately, that includes many people who will adamantly insist that they're following Jesus. I honestly almost switched sports in this analogy because football is vastly more popular in the United States, and it didn't seem like a good idea to make Christianity the less popular sport in the analogy. And then I realized that is actually the perfect illustration of the real life discomfort of this kind of change. The next big idea is that it's not that we're saying that there is a game of football going on and that you should switch to soccer. It's that everyone is already playing soccer and almost nobody notices or believes it. And many people have sensed for a long time that the world doesn't quite work the way people say it's supposed to. We think we're scoring points, getting job promotions, making more money, accumulating more likes and followers, but for some reason, it doesn't actually feel like we're winning. There's an underlying sense that something isn't quite right with the way the world says the game is played. If you are playing a game by the wrong rules and you begin to play according to its intended design, there is a rightness to it. There's a sense of shalom, a peace, and a wholeness to life. It's the way it should be. And people who step out of the ways of the world and make this change might be rarer than we'd like, but we're fortunate to have 2,000 years of examples of devoted Christ followers who can testify to this kind of change. As an aside, I found that a lot of the ways Christians talk about things don't always click for me the way that they seem to for others, which is part of what gets me thinking about things like this. If that's you, or if you just like hearing things put a different way, there's a button for people like you. Some call it the subscribe button. So even if the game might not be working quite the way it's supposed to, people are hesitant to switch games because they've scored so many touchdowns. They've got a lot to lose, or at least that's the way it seems. But if the game is really soccer, your touchdowns mean nothing. This is why the prophets, Jesus and his first followers, warned that many of the people who appear to be winning life, like the rich, the powerful, people who are wise in the world's eyes, are actually the furthest from winning. If you have a lot of points in the world's eyes, it's so much harder to see, much less admit that you've been approaching life the wrong way the whole time. It's why so many people in lower levels of society flocked to Jesus, while the rich and influential couldn't bring themselves to sell everything they owned to buy the field with the treasure hidden in it. If you're down and out, if you have hit bottom, or if you come to the point where you realize that the game doesn't work as you've been led to believe, it becomes a lot easier to turn to Jesus. If you're a professing Christian, have you embraced the whole life change that comes with following Jesus? Or are you essentially still trying to score touchdowns just against different opponents? Or maybe with a few soccer rules grafted in? Changing teams is changing who your opponent is. Changing games is moving from hating your opponents to loving them. Changing teams is using your power to promote a different agenda. Changing games is using your power to serve others. Changing teams is looking for the approval of a different group of people. Changing games is being free from caring about the approval of others because God's opinion is the only one that matters. And if you know you're still just playing the world's game, man, I have great news. There is so much more for you. There's fullness of life. There is peace and rest from the anxiety. There's freedom from the relentless power seeking and rat race. And there's security and hope that the struggles of this life can't touch. And there is so much more for us as a community of believers when we walk this out together, and so much more for our world when we start living this out. Because the way the world plays the game isn't working, and if you're like me, you have felt that.